Captured by an Apache women's tribe, the lonely rancher won every woman's heart. Jack McCoy rode his horse across the desert, the sun high and relentless above him. The trail seemed endless, stretching far into the horizon. His cattle had long since been herded to the new land he hoped to claim for his ranch, but the road to finding it had not been easy. This part of the frontier was wild and untamed. The air was dry, and the silence of the desert was deafening. Jack wasn't used to being so far from town. He was a man of simple needs: his ranch, a roof over his head, and a few good men to help him with the cattle. He wasn't interested in the politics of the world, nor in the bustling towns and the noise of busy life. He found peace in the quiet of the open plains. But today, something felt off. There was a weight in the air, a strange stillness that even the wind seemed to avoid. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Jack felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He glanced around, but all he could see were the endless sand dunes. The landscape was flat, except for the distant mountains, which seemed to mock him with their unapproachable heights. Then, without warning, a shadow moved. Jack's instincts kicked in. His hand gripped the reins tightly as his horse shifted nervously beneath him. He hadn't heard anything, no footsteps, no rustling in the brush, but the presence was undeniable. Suddenly, figures appeared out of the dust, swift and silent as ghosts. Women. Their faces were hidden behind the hoods of their cloaks, their movements fluid and coordinated. Before Jack could react, one of them leaped forward, taking hold of his reins, pulling his horse to a halt. "Easy there," Jack muttered, trying to regain control, but the woman's grip was stronger than he expected. She was tall, her eyes sharp as knives. He could see the intensity in them and the fierceness that came with the land they had been born into. "Who are you?" Jack demanded, his hand resting on the gun at his side, though he wasn't sure if it would do any good against these mysterious women. The woman didn't answer right away. She only motioned for him to dismount. Jack hesitated, but with no other choice. He slid off the horse and stood facing the circle of women now surrounding him. Their weapons, bows and arrows, were held steady in their hands, each woman radiating power and quiet strength. "I don't mean any harm," Jack said, though he knew the words would mean little in the face of such a fierce unknown tribe. "I'm just passing through." The woman who had first approached him stepped forward. She was the tallest of the group, with long dark hair and a commanding presence. Her name was Kaya, and her voice was firm yet soft, like the desert wind that carried secrets. "You are trespassing on sacred land." Jack's mind raced. He had heard stories of Apache tribes, but none that matched the women standing before him. These women weren't like the ones he had encountered in town. They were something else. They were strong, wild, and unyielding. "I didn't know," Jack said, trying to explain, but Kaya's gaze silenced him. "You will come with us," she commanded. Jack's first instinct was to resist. He was a rancher, not someone who would bow to a tribe of women. But something in her gaze made him hesitate. There was no fear in her eyes, only determination and strength. And Jack recognized that, despite his best efforts to remain calm, he was bound, not by ropes, but by the power these women held over him. Kaya turned and gestured for him to follow. Two of the other women grabbed his arms, guiding him along as the rest of the tribe surrounded him. The night was falling quickly now, and the desert air grew cooler. Jack had no idea where they were taking him, but he knew that it was not going to be an easy escape. As they walked through the darkening desert, he couldn't help but wonder who these women were, what they wanted, and how he had ended up in this strange situation. The walk was long, but eventually they reached a hidden valley, a place Jack never would have found on his own. It was like a world within the world, a secluded secret haven where the Apache women had lived for generations, far from the prying eyes of the world. Jack was taken to a large fire pit at the center of the village. The flames flickered high, casting long shadows against the stone walls that surrounded the camp. Kaya motioned for him to sit. "Why did you bring me here?" Jack asked again, trying to make sense of everything. Kaya didn't answer immediately. She took a seat across from him, watching him intently. The other women had gathered around, forming a circle. They didn't speak, but Jack could feel their eyes on him, waiting for him to speak. "We are protectors," Kaya said finally, her voice low. "This land is sacred to us, and we do not allow outsiders." "You were not supposed to find this place." Jack frowned. "So what now?" Kaya's eyes softened just a bit. "Now you stay with us. You will learn our ways, and perhaps you will find that you have a place here." Jack didn't understand her meaning, but there was something in her voice that told him she wasn't lying. As the night wore on, he would learn more about the Apache tribe, their customs, and their purpose. But for now, all he could do was sit in silence and wonder how this strange encounter would change his life. Jack McCoy sat by the fire, staring into the flames as they danced and flickered in the cool desert night. The Apache women had gathered around him, their faces serene and watchful, like ancient statues carved into the earth itself. Kaya, the leader, sat beside him, her eyes never leaving him, as if she were searching for something he didn't yet understand. The firelight illuminated her strong features, casting shadows that made her look even more fierce and mysterious. Jack had no choice but to be quiet, to let the silence settle around him like a heavy blanket. His mind was racing, but he knew better than to speak out of turn. These women, this tribe, he was not in control here. You will stay with us for a while, Kaya said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady and calm, but there was an edge to it. We have many questions, and you will answer them. Jack didn't know what she meant, but he nodded. He had no other choice. The days that followed were filled with learning, or at least trying to learn. The Apache women taught Jack their ways, showing him how to survive in the desert and understand their deep connection to the land. It wasn't just about hunting or gathering. There was a spiritual bond between the people and the earth that Jack couldn't yet grasp. The women didn't speak much about their past, but Jack could tell there was more to their lives than he had first imagined. They were warriors in their own right, strong and independent, living off the land as their ancestors had. But there was something else too, a sense of mystery, something Jack couldn't put his finger on. Each day, Kaya led him through different trials. First, it was learning to track animals through the desert. Jack wasn't used to such silent movements, but Kaya was patient. She watched him closely, and though her face remained impassive, there was a certain approval in her eyes when he succeeded. You are strong, Kaya said one morning after Jack had successfully tracked a deer through the brush. Her words felt heavy, almost like a challenge. Jack could sense that she was testing him, pushing him to his limits. But why? That evening the tribe gathered around the fire, as they always did. Kaya spoke, and Jack listened carefully. She told stories of their people, of the land they protected, and of the deep connection they shared with the stars. Jack didn't understand everything, but he was learning that these women were not like any he had ever met before. They had an ancient knowledge, something powerful and sacred. I do not know why you are here, Kaya said one night, her voice quieter than usual, but the stars have brought you to us. And they do not make mistakes. Jack's heart skipped a beat. The stars? What did that mean? He had come here seeking a new life, but now he was caught in something he didn't fully understand. He had a feeling he was being watched, not just by Kaya and the others, but by something far greater than himself. As the days turned into weeks, Jack began to notice the other women. They weren't just the warriors or the guardians of the tribe. There was a gentleness to them, too. They cared for him in a way that was unexpected, offering him food, helping him with tasks, and even sharing their knowledge. Each one of them seemed to have a different role to play, and each one of them had a strength of her own. One afternoon, as Jack helped a younger woman named Apache with some work by the river, she looked up at him, her eyes wide and full of wonder. "Why did you come here?" she asked softly. "You are so different from the men who come to our land." Jack paused, unsure of how to answer. "I was looking for something... peace, I guess." Apache nodded slowly. "The peace you seek is not the same peace we know. Ours comes from the earth, from the stars, from the balance of all things." Jack didn't fully understand, but he felt something stir inside him. There was a deep wisdom in her words, and it made him want to learn more. These women weren't just surviving. They were living in harmony with the world around them in a way he could never have imagined. Over the next few days, Jack's feelings began to change. He had come here as a prisoner, a captive of sorts. But as he spent more time with Kaya and the others, he realized he was no longer just a man trapped in a strange land. He was beginning to see the world through their eyes. And though he still longed for his ranch, the simple life he had known before, a part of him was starting to belong here with them. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Kaya approached him. Her steps were quiet, but Jack felt the presence of her strong, steady energy before she even spoke. "You are learning," she said simply as she sat beside him. "You have earned our respect." Jack felt a warmth spread through him at her words, but there was something else there, too, something deeper. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time, and in that moment, he saw her, not just as a leader, but as a woman who had faced the same struggles he had, who had known the same loneliness. "There's more to you than I first thought," Jack said, his voice low and honest. "I didn't expect this. I didn't expect to feel like this." Kaya didn't respond right away. She looked out across the desert, her eyes fixed on the distant stars. "There is always more than we see," she said softly. "The stars show us the way, but we must choose to follow." The words hung in the air, and Jack realized that this wasn't just about the tribe or the desert, or even the trials they had set for him. This was about his own journey, and though he didn't know where it would lead, he was beginning to feel like he wasn't as alone as he had once believed. Jack McCoy awoke early the next morning to the sound of distant drums echoing through the valley. The night had been quiet, peaceful even, but something in the air felt different today. He stood up from his bedroll, stretching his stiff limbs. As his feet touched the cold ground, he noticed a faint glow in the sky, a sign that the sun was just beginning to rise over the mountains. The Apache women were already up, moving around the camp with a quiet efficiency. They seemed to have a rhythm, a harmony with the land that Jack couldn't quite understand. It was as if their lives were connected to the earth itself, their every movement in sync with the natural world. Kaya, as always, was at the heart of the tribe's activities. Jack had spent the past few weeks getting to know her, learning her ways, but he had never fully understood the depth of her power. She was more than just a leader. She carried a wisdom that seemed ancient, as if she had seen and experienced things that went beyond the lives of ordinary people. That morning, Kaya approached Jack as he stood by the fire, tending to a pot of coffee. Her eyes were sharp, but there was something else in them, something almost knowing. "Today you will see what we truly protect," she said, her voice steady. "There are things in this world that you cannot understand with just your eyes. You must see with your heart." Jack wasn't sure what she meant, but he nodded, sensing that today would bring something important. Kaya motioned for him to follow her as she led him through the camp, down a narrow path that Jack had never noticed before. It wound through the trees, and the further they went, the more the air seemed to thicken with an unspoken energy. The path led them to a clearing, where a massive stone circle stood in the center. It was surrounded by tall, ancient trees that seemed to stretch toward the sky, their roots deep in the earth. In the middle of the stone circle, a large fire pit was built, still smoldering from the night before. The entire area seemed charged, as if it held a power Jack had never felt before. "This is the heart of our tribe," Kaya explained, her voice softer now. "It is where we connect with the stars." Jack stood in silence, taking in the sight before him. The stones looked old, older than anything he had ever seen. They seemed to pulse with energy, as though they had been touched by something beyond human understanding. Kaya turned to him, her expression serious. "The stars have guided us for centuries. They are not just lights in the sky. They are our ancestors, our protectors. And they have chosen you, Jack." Jack felt a chill run down his spine at her words. He had always believed in the stars, but this was something different. He had never thought of them as anything more than distant points of light. But Kaya spoke as though they were alive, conscious and watching over them. "You were meant to be here," she continued. "The stars do not make mistakes. They have brought you to us for a reason." Before Jack could respond, Kaya gestured for him to step into the center of the stone circle. He hesitated for a moment, but something in her gaze told him this was no ordinary request. He stepped forward, and as soon as his foot touched the earth, the air around him seemed to shift. It was as if a wave of energy passed through him, and Jack felt something stirring deep inside. Kaya stepped beside him, closing her eyes. She raised her arms toward the sky, and the other women of the tribe gathered around the circle, their eyes fixed on the stars above. Jack could feel the energy in the air intensify, like an electric charge building up before a storm. Then, the ground beneath him trembled. It wasn't violent, but it was unmistakable. Jack's heart began to race as he looked around, wondering what was happening. "The stars are speaking," Kaya said quietly, her voice filled with reverence. "They are awakening." Jack's mind was reeling. He had heard tales of strange occurrences in the desert, but nothing like this. As the earth beneath him hummed with energy, Jack felt something stirring inside him, something ancient and powerful. He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew it was connected to the tribe, to the land, and to Kaya. Suddenly, a bright light flashed above them, and Jack looked up in awe. The stars, which had seemed so distant and unreachable before, now appeared to be moving, shifting across the sky in a way he couldn't explain. The air crackled with an energy that seemed to reach out and touch him, pulling him into something much larger than himself. In that moment, Jack understood. This was why he had been brought here. This was why the stars had chosen him. He wasn't just a rancher anymore. He was part of something much greater, something that reached beyond the earth and into the cosmos. Kaya turned to him, her expression filled with a quiet understanding. "You are ready, Jack. The power of the stars is in you. It has always been in you." Jack looked into her eyes, his heart pounding. He didn't fully understand what this meant, but he knew that his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a man passing through the desert. He was part of this tribe, part of this ancient connection to the stars. And with that realization came a deep sense of responsibility. As the light from the stars began to fade, the earth settled back into its natural rhythm. The energy in the air slowly dissipated, leaving Jack with a sense of peace he had never known before. Kaya lowered her arms and stepped toward him. "You will not be the same," she said softly. "You have seen the truth. You have felt the power of the stars." Jack nodded, his mind still spinning with what he had just experienced. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He was no longer the lonely rancher who had stumbled into this land. He was part of something greater, and that knowledge filled him with a sense of purpose he had never felt before. "Thank you," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for showing me." Kaya gave him a small, knowing smile. "The stars have chosen you, Jack. And with that choice comes a new path. A path we must walk together." As the night settled in and the stars above grew brighter, Jack felt a deep sense of peace. He had found his place, not just with the Apache women, but with the land, the stars, and the universe itself. And for the first time in a long time, Jack McCoy no longer felt alone. The next few days passed in a blur of activity, but Jack McCoy felt different. The power he had felt in the circle, the connection to the stars, it stayed with him. Each morning, as the sun rose over the mountains, he felt more at home with the Apache women and their ways. He had come to understand that he was no longer just a man passing through the desert. He had become part of something larger, something that stretched from the land to the sky. But even as he embraced this new life, a part of him still longed for the ranch, for the quiet solitude he had once known. He often found himself standing at the edge of the camp, looking out toward the horizon, the place where his past and future seemed to meet. Kaya had noticed this, and her presence at his side had become a constant. One evening, as the camp settled into its usual quiet, Kaya joined Jack by the fire. She had been watching him, her eyes filled with an understanding that seemed to go deeper than words. "Ah, you are torn, Jack," Kaya said, her voice soft but certain. "Your heart is divided." Jack looked at her, startled by how well she understood him. He hadn't said anything about his struggle, but somehow Kaya always seemed to know. "I don't belong here," Jack said, his voice rough with uncertainty. "I'm not one of you. I'm a rancher. I've lived alone my whole life. This connection to the stars, to the land, it's all new to me. I don't know how to keep it all together." Kaya's gaze softened, and she reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "The stars did not choose you to live in the past, Jack. They chose you because you are strong. You have been given a gift, but you must choose how to use it." Jack stared into the fire, the flames flickering in front of him, but his mind was elsewhere. He had never been one to make decisions based on anything other than logic and reason. But this, the stars, the Apache women, his bond with Kaya, it was beyond anything he could explain. The pull he felt toward the land was deep, but so was the connection to the woman standing beside him. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Jack said quietly. "I don't know if I'm ready to stay, to take on this responsibility. I'm just a man. What do I have to offer?" Kaya sighed softly, her voice calm yet filled with a quiet strength. "You are more than just a man, Jack. You are a protector now. You are part of something greater than yourself. But I will not ask you to stay if your heart is not here. You must choose what your heart tells you." Jack was silent for a long time, the weight of Kaya's words sinking into him like the desert night's chill. His heart was torn between two worlds, the world of the ranch, where he had once lived in solitude, and the world of the tribe, where he felt a sense of belonging he had never known before. The next day, the camp was alive with activity. The women had heard word of a group of settlers coming toward the Apache land. They were strangers, their intentions unclear, and Kaya had called a meeting to discuss what to do. Jack joined the group, standing quietly at the edge as Kaya spoke to the tribe. He could sense the urgency in her voice, the determination that had always defined her. She was the leader of the tribe, and she would not let anyone threaten the land they had sworn to protect. "We do not know who these settlers are," Kaya said, her voice calm but firm. "But we cannot risk the safety of our people. We will send a message, a warning. And if they do not leave, we will take action."
Jack felt his heart race.
This was it. This was the moment when everything would change. The decision that had been hanging over him, the choice between staying with the tribe or returning to the ranch, was no longer his alone to make. This was a fight for the land, for the people he had come to care for. As Kaya spoke, Jack felt a surge of purpose. He had been a rancher before, used to handling cattle and dealing with the challenges of the land, but this was different. He was not just protecting his own property now. He was protecting something far greater, the future of the Apache people. When Kaya finished speaking, she turned to Jack. Her eyes locked onto his, and for the first time he saw something more than just the leader of the tribe. He saw a woman who trusted him, a woman who had shared her wisdom with him, and a woman who had become a part of his life in ways he hadn't fully realized until now. "I will stay," Jack said, his voice steady. "I will fight with you." Kaya smiled, the corners of her mouth lifting just slightly. It was the first time he had seen her smile with such warmth, and it made his heart skip a beat. "I knew you would, Jack. You belong here." As the day passed, Jack prepared for the confrontation. The tribe was ready, each woman standing tall, their weapons sharp and their resolve unshakable. Jack felt his role in the tribe solidify, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, he knew what he had to do. He wasn't just a rancher anymore. He was part of this land, part of these women, part of the fight for their future. That night, the women gathered around the fire, and Kaya approached Jack once more. "You have made your choice," she said softly, her voice full of respect. "You are a part of us now, and whatever happens tomorrow, we will face it together." Jack nodded, his heart full of resolve. "I'm ready." The next morning, the settlers arrived. There were a dozen or more, men and women, all looking to make their way in the desert. But as they neared the Apache camp, they were met with a warning, one that Jack had helped deliver. The settlers stopped, seeing the tribe ready and waiting. Kaya stood tall at the front of the group, Jack beside her. She called out to the settlers, telling them to turn back, that the land was not for them. It was a peaceful warning, but one that carried the weight of the tribe's power. The settlers hesitated, but they had not come this far to turn back. Tensions rose quickly, but before the situation could escalate, Jack stepped forward, his voice calm and commanding. "You'll find no peace here if you don't listen," Jack said. "Turn back and leave this land. It's not yours to take." The settlers saw the strength in his words, in his posture. There was no sign of fear, no hesitation. Jack had become one with the tribe, and they knew it. In the end, the settlers left, their intentions unclear, but the tribe had won the day. That evening, Jack stood at the edge of the camp once more, looking out toward the horizon. He had made his choice. He had chosen to stay, to fight, and to protect the land that had become his home. And as Kaya joined him, standing silently beside him, Jack knew that this was where he was meant to be.